Good evening, dear students. Hope you are vibrant and enthusiastic to study because this is something that is currently taking place, what we are learning in this chapter, like what we learned in the last class. And I hope you enjoy learning and wish you happy learning. Today we have to go to the next topic and finish it because our schedule is like that. But before that, let me finish what we had left yesterday. Because of want of time, we had left some portions yesterday. They are also quite long, so we have to little bit of rushing. We are in fact covering each and every point. So that is the reason why, because I feel each and every point is important, and the entire lesson is stuffed with information. You have to be reading it thoroughly because so many questions can be asked. Not only questions, it is information, loaded with information, and I hope it will help you in your career. So I think we stopped with quota rent today, yesterday. That is the advantage and disadvantage of having a quota. For example, consumers suffer consumer surplus. They don't have sufficient consumer surplus because the price of the imported good. The example I said yesterday was car. Let it be car, let it be piano, let it be cold drinks, let it be ice cream, whatever it is. The price of the imported good rise, and so people have to pay more. Not only that, some diversion of demand takes place to the domestic goods, which means domestic producers are also able to raise price because supply has now reduced. Import quota is applied and the imports from the other countries reduce means total supply is reduced. And so prices, domestic prices will rise. Producers are happy because they can sell at a high price. Consumers are unhappy because they will get only domestic goods and that too the price is high. Probably all those story-like consequences. Then what is the quota holder's happiness? They can get economic rent. Economic rent is something like a supernormal profit for which they have not worked before. You know, in economic theory, for us, in economics people, there are two types of profit. One is normal profit, that is for the entrepreneurial functions. Second one is supernormal profit. So here, they earn economic rent simply by holding a license to import. You remember yesterday's example, you may import for 50, that is the cost of import is 50 lakh. But since this foreign cars are demanded by rich people so much, he can sell it for 1 crore. So on each car, he'll get 50 lakhs profit multiplied by 3,000 cars that are imported. So this is quota rent enjoyed. Okay. Then tariff rate quota we have already. I think we started price control measures. Price control. So when it is price control, it is what is going to get affected is price. Okay, a change in price. What is effect of tariff? It is also price related measure. That is why these measures which are manipulating the price, trying to change the price, increasing the price or decreasing the price. Okay, it can be for encouraging imports. Then you want to decrease the price, then you give a subsidy. It can be for restricting imports, then you add an amount to the imported good. For example, government can have any ordinance, isn't it? They can pass any rule. So, say for example, import of electronic goods, right? When the goods come, tariffs are restricted because of WTO. We can always say, okay, imported good, let it come at 10% tariff. But the moment it enters our boundary, you can sell it only at a minimum price of, say, 5,000. So you have set the minimum price. Actually, the tariff plus import price will be 4,000. But you keep the minimum price at which it can be it can be sold. Okay, so 4,000 plus 1,000. So this is one way in which prices, import prices are, domestic prices of imported goods are increased. Since it is equivalent to tariff, as far as a consumer is concerned, it is equivalent to tariff. Okay, it is as though tariff was paid on the boundary, right? And so this is known as, but not exactly tariff. And that is why this is known as para tariff. You know, para military, not fully military but half military. Okay, like para tariff, it is not tariff but the effect is tariff. Okay. So this will increase the price of the imported goods. So this is a price control measure. Then there are hundreds of other methods, but one more method I mentioned that is given in your book, a minimum import price. You import the commodity, but it should be imported at a minimum price of, say, for example, 25 rupees. How is this minimum price decided? It is related to the domestic price of the imported good. Because year before last, we wanted to import coconut from Sri Lanka. Government said, import coconut, but import it only at, at the domestic price. Not below that. Because Sri Lanka will be willing to give us coconut at a price below what is prevailing. Why we are importing itself is because price of coconut in India is more. So a minimum import price, that is specifying the lowest price at which you can import. For example, rubber, natural rubber. When you are importing, the rubber producers will be very unhappy. There is always a fight between, the tire lobby and the rubber lobby. Okay? The tire lobby always want to import, but the rubber producers, natural rubber producers, estate owners, they don't want rubber to be imported. And so they will be lobbying and pressurizing the government, right? Then you will say, okay, you import, but import only at a price which is prescribed. And that price will have connection with the domestic price. Okay. Then comes other measures like non-automatic licensing. You know what is automatic licensing? This year I get a license, next year also automatically gets renewed. But next year also, suppose I have to go through all these procedures and this license renewal is done on a case-by-case basis. Like they decide whether the government should really give me license. Then it is a difficulty for the license holder. Okay, so imports can be restricted. Then discretionary license. All these points are given in it. Discretionary license. The government the authority keeps the discretion whether to give or not to give. Okay. Then the extreme case of restricting import is total prohibition. I think since you are watching the market, you know what is total prohibition. India has totally prohibited so many items, import of so many items. That is import of 47 billion. Okay, extent of 47 billion of defense items which we were purchasing abroad. Okay, we will produce it locally. 101 items at a stretch. As I am speaking now, maybe government would have planned to ban the export of so many items. Atma Nirbhar. Okay, then all varieties of onion exporters banned by India because of shortage. We have banned the import of so many Chinese goods, electronic goods, Chinese apps. Okay. Ban on import of rubber June this year. This year there was a ban on import of rubber. Okay. Total ban. The government can do that. Okay. Then financial measures. What are the financial measures? So far we have been talking about procedures and all that. Now let us see how can government keep a restriction on the finance that is available. You know, for importing, you have to definitely get dollars or euro, whatever it is. But mostly let us keep it dollars, right? Because everything is mentioned in terms of dollars. Okay, this foreign exchange controls is a very, very efficient way of controlling imports. For example, no forex will be given for importing such and such and such goods. I cannot get foreign exchange. How can I import? It is not possible. So regulate the availability, regulate the access, or say that foreign exchange can be procured only at this rate. For example, no concession, a higher rate has to be given for importing. Then you define the terms of payment. I am using the same terms given in your book so that because exams are coming very soon, you know, we have no time to go, keep wandering the terms, right? Define the terms of payment. For example, you take the money, but this is the way the payment is to be done. For example, you make the payment, that is the example given in your book. Make the payment 3 months before the import. What is the disadvantage? My cost of payment increases because I have to procure forex before 3 months. Okay. Then the next point is government may impose measures that are affecting competition. What is competition? When the good is coming into the domestic market. For example, an imported good comes to the domestic market, good X. Then good X should be capable of competing in the domestic market. Freely compete in the domestic market with the similar goods, say for example X1 in the domestic market. Now restrictions can be there on competing. For example, we can say good X, the moment good X comes, you know, it should be imported by a particular agency, say A. Okay, or a few people ABC. That means it is fully in the hands of ABC. Right? These ABC will decide what will be the price in the domestic area. Okay, because it is fully how much of it will be released to the domestic area and what price it should release, when it should release, you know, all these conditions. Right? Then, you know, canalization, that is state trading corporation, import channels. You can import this and this and this material only through a state agency. Okay, canalizing agency like State Trading Corporation or Oil India Limited. Okay, like that. So, like that, you will compulsorily, you will say only such and such agencies will import. Then always the imported commodities, how it can enter the domestic market, at what price it can enter the domestic market gets restricted. That is one problem. Then there can be statutory marketing board. For example, for marketing the imported commodity, there is a marketing board. Any number of institutions coming in between will affect competition. If it is free market, good X should freely enter the domestic market. That doesn't take place. Okay. Then next is you say when you are bringing this good X, or if it is a service X, it can be good or service, you have to use the national services. For example, national services or national services. What type of services? Like you have to transport goods using domestic transport. You have to use domestic banking services. You have to use domestic insurance services. All repair services, repacking services, all types of services should be procured. Government purchases. You remember C plus I plus G, government purchases. So government purchases is huge amount of money is spent by government procuring goods as well as services. So when government procures, preference will be given to purchase preference, domestic purchase preference policy. That is, purchase will be done from domestic firms. Say for example, suppose the government is purchasing material for uniform. You can always import, right? Imported commodities may be cheaper, but still they will purchase from Indian textile, like preference to Indian goods. Then when tenders are called, you know how purchases take place. Government will put a tender as to, and to the lowest bidder, the order will go. When tenders are put, they'll write underneath, only Indian suppliers need apply. What does it mean? National tenders are not there, isn't it? But this may sound very patriotic. Okay, India government buying from domestic economy. Sounds very patriotic, but it is not rational from the economic point of view. Because wherever you can reduce cost, we should be reducing cost. Okay, and that is one way in which government purchases are manipulated to support domestic industry, to protect domestic industry. Competition definitely matters. You remember competition here. Competition definitely matters. Why I am saying this now is because you will think, why is that I am saying foreign goods should not come to domestic. If foreign goods are not coming to domestic market, there will be no competition. And we are breeding inefficiency. We are feeding inefficiency. If there is no competition, there will be no incentive to bring in change. I'll tell you some examples. Take the prices of mobiles. Mobiles were first introduced, if I remember, 98-99 time. The price of a very unsophisticated mobile phone was as high as 3,000 rupees. Right? What about talk time plans? We live long enough, 8 rupees per minute, 5 rupees for incoming calls. That is, if someone is calling us also, we have to pay. Okay. Then it became 6 rupees per minute. Then it became 4 rupees per minute. And for incoming calls, I don't exactly remember the tariff. And this was it. Then what about the features of mobile phone? At that time, we could only talk and answer and reply. That's all. But now, hundreds of features are available, and I will say prices are also not proportionately more. How come this was made possible? Of course, technological innovation, you will answer. But why technological innovation? Because new and better and innovative mobile phones have to be made. Only then you can compete and survive. Okay, as Schumpeter's, that's a Schumpeter's theory. Those who innovate get profit. Those who innovate, so new and better things. Okay. Then next is trade-related investment measure. Trade-related investment measure. When investments come to this country, that is the last unit we are going to study. Okay, you keep a lot of restrictions. Like if you are coming here with money to make cars, that's easily understood. Okay, to make cars, then 50% of all components and 50% of all parts should be bought from this country. That is so that they will not import. Okay, so imports can be restricted. Such as foreign investors, import can be restricted by keeping local content requirements. Last year, I hope you remember our solar panels import. We insisted that Indian batteries should be used. That is a local content requirement. Then restricting the level of imported components. You can only use 20% imported components. You have restricted the imports. Then the third one mentioned is very important. That is, you make some money by exporting this year. Okay, you make 10 crores of rupees by exporting your goods this year. You can import 10 or 10 plus crore next year, or a little less than. So your import is related to the export proceeds that you have brought. Then distribution restrictions. That is, when these goods come here, this is not actually permitted under WTO, but when foreign goods come to domestic territory, place lots of restrictions on post-sale services like transportation, transportation services, and also if cars are there, cars have to be serviced year after year, once in 6 months, like that. But you bring your car here, servicing will be done by Maruti, or servicing will be done by our local agencies. Imported cars, they will not be happy. Suppose it is Lexus car, they say our car is zero complaint. Will they be happy that our local workshop is repairing and maintaining and servicing it? They will not be. So they would prefer not to export rather than, So this is restriction on post-sale services. You can import bike, but no service can be imported once you sell the bike. These are all restricting the import of goods. Then there is quantitative restriction. We have already mentioned, that is, you can import such and such quantity alone, right? Then administrative procedures. We are going fast. Administrative procedures are, I don't have to explain, all costly, time-consuming administrative procedures where you have to go to 15 tables in order to get a single paper moved. You have to wait, and all that increases your cost of transaction and discourage you from importing. That is procedures, formalities, red tape, licensing, bribing. All these will, cause a lot of delay. And when there is delay, there is loss of money, right? And so, this is it. Then comes rules of origin that we'll be learning today. Rules of origin. What is the meaning of origin? Say for example, a mobile phone comes to India, a mobile phone. They say that this mobile phone is made in Korea, South Korea. What is the guarantee that it is made in South Korea? Maybe 95% of its components came to South Korea from different countries. And South Korea added only 5% value. Then which country did it really originate? Very difficult to determine. So rule of origin is, the principle in WTO, we are going to learn that, used to determine the nationality of goods. Where did this good actually originate? You know the reason? The reason is the amount of tariff that is to be charged. The amount of tariff or the conditions of import depends upon where the good is actually manufactured. It is very difficult to determine the rule of origin because no single country produces the entire good. The entire manufacturing process is never taking place in a single country. Take medicines, take pharmaceuticals, everywhere it is. Take automobiles, take electronic goods. Production takes place in multiple countries. So rule of origin, when it is made strict, labeling requirement, you have seen it, made in Germany. What part of this is made in Germany? Sometimes only 5%. So to say that something originates in an economy where it originated, that creates a lot of delays. Then there are safeguard measures. Safeguard is, suppose there is a sudden spurt, sudden increase in a sudden increase in import. Say for example, import of mango or import of electronic goods. For some reason, suddenly people started importing more, and the domestic market is flooded with imported goods. Then what will happen to the domestic industries? They will be negatively affected, very badly affected. Then we can of course put, as I say, this is allowed in WTO. This we'll put some type of safeguard measure to protect. Otherwise, our industries will die. Our industries will not survive, and that is safeguard measures also restrict. Then there is embargo. I hope this is not a new term, because now people are talking quite a lot about embargo. Embargo is, sanctions. Sanction is not permission. These sanctions are totally cut off a country, a trade, communication, relationship, etc. between two countries is totally cut off. It can be for political reasons. It can be for different, like North Korea, total relation cut off. Okay, US is very angry with North Korea. As early as 1980s, we know embargoes were on Libya. The embargo on Qatar. The embargo on Iraq. The embargo on Cuba by US. Then North Korea, of course. Then Yemen, because the Houthis were importing weapons. All geographical connections, import, export, etc. Banned. Embargo is a total restriction on import. Right? Country of origin we have already discussed. Why is that this country of origin? Anyway, this is a next chapter topic, but still we will learn country of origin little more. I'll talk. Why is this? I forgot. Country of origin. Why is that? You should know whether this has actually come from South Korea or whether it has come from some other place. As I told you, this percentage of tariff is decided on the basis of country of origin. Okay, the country of origin. Suppose India has a free trade agreement with Nepal. Okay, a free trade agreement with Nepal, so that Nepal can sell at 0% duty. Nepal can sell at 0% duty. And so what will, if it is produced in Korea, right, we will put 15% duty. If it is produced in Nepal, we will have 0 duty. So which is easier? Come on. A Korean mobile phone will first go to Nepal and put a label made in Nepal and sent to India at 0%. That is why rules of origin is important. You call it trade deflection, T-R-A-D-E, next word deflection. Deflection is, twisting something, right? Trade deflection is entry into a low tariff area and then through that enter. Now that we have banned Chinese goods, we are afraid this is going to happen. That is, Chinese goods will definitely enter into India through a free trade area. Then we can prevent this transshipment if we are very particular about rules of origin, and rules of origin is a very, very difficult issue. Okay. Now, export. Now, all import related measures are over. What are we learning now? Okay. Trade, instruments of trade policy. There can be ban on exports, export taxes, export subsidy. You know what is export subsidy? Give me some money for, yesterday we discussed. That is Merchandise India scheme. Okay. Then export subsidies, export incentives. You have heard about duty drawback. What is duty drawback? You can draw back the duty that you have paid. Duty-free access, soft loan, equity infusion, tax concession, price support. And the last one is voluntary export restraint. One question can be asked on that, because the examiners would definitely like to ask on voluntary export restraint, or VER, voluntary export restraint. Country A is exporting good to country B, and country B is unhappy that these goods are coming into country from country A. But because of WTO rules and because of different rules, country B cannot ask us and tell us, okay, we are going to put 30% instead of 10%. They cannot do that. So indirectly, a negotiation will take place between country A and B, in which country A will agree, okay, we will not export. Clear? Because country B does not want, if it is pepper, Indian pepper going to US, come on, then we will not export India. We voluntarily restrict our exports on the basis of a negotiation. Why do we agree? America really wants our pepper, but America has some disadvantage when we buy our pepper, and they don't want pepper to go to them, or some electronic goods to go to their place. And so, if we don't obey or if we don't agree, we are afraid America is going to threaten us, retaliate. They are not going to buy something else from us, or they are going to keep an embargo on us, or some political issue they are going to make. So because we are so scared and such type of retaliation, fearing that, what is the consequence of that? We voluntarily restrained our exports. There are so many cases like that where we have voluntarily restrict the export due to political reasons, due to negotiations. You don't export this, we will later give you some concessions, we'll give you some grant, we'll give you some concession, we'll give you some tariff concession in the next negotiation. Like that, we voluntarily restrict. And that is the end of the chapter. But if you go to the end, the last line in that chapter, by the time I am teaching this, actually after writing this book, so many changes have taken. By the time I am teaching this, and by the time you are start your work, become chartered accountants and start your work, things would have changed substantially. Every day the things are changing. And so there is a proviso given as at the last page. This is not comprehensive. This is we are only just touching upon this. And students are requested to read the newspaper. We have the background now behind your brain, okay? You can understand things once you read the Business Daily. So please read and keep yourself updated. That is the duty of the student, because everything cannot be included in a textbook. We can only have the skeleton or the theory. The rest of it, what is happening, you have to learn. That takes us to the next topic that is supposed to be taught today. That is trade negotiations. Trade negotiations. We go slightly faster, and many points are discussed already in the previous chapter. I think we'll be able to go. What is a negotiation? You heard about Negotiable Instrument Act, okay? It is not that. What is negotiation actually? Negotiation is something like a conflict resolution. When there are differences of opinion, negotiation, for example, you've heard about the trade unions negotiating for better pay, collectively negotiating for better pay. It is a process of combining conflicting positions. I think that's given in your book. There are conflicting positions. Trade unions want high wages, managements want to pay lower wages. Trade unions have obvious reasons because cost of living has gone up. Managements have also supporting reasons because market price has reduced, demand has reduced. Sometimes you'll have to close the business altogether. That happened here when estate laborers ask for higher prices. Estate is already running on losses. Then how can you give higher wages? So these are conflicting positions. And how do you reach a common position? It is conflict resolution actually, a common position. That is, both of us agree. Some laborers give up a little, management also give up a little. And this is discussion, sitting together and discussing. And what is the outcome? The outcome is determined by the process of negotiation. The outcome can be, both of them may gain in the negotiation. Because there is a conflict, both are equally powerful, isn't it? So that is a negotiation. I hope. So what is a trade negotiation? Trade negotiation is conflicting interests. Usually trading partners have conflicting interest. I don't want your imports to come to my country, but I want you to accept my exports. I don't want to give you market access, but I want market access in your territory. Definitely conflict. But one party needs another party's agreement. Without agreement, I cannot get market access. I need the agreement of the second party in order to achieve my aim of entering their market. So, nations meet together to discuss the possibility of trade. Nations meet to discuss the possibility of trade. Why trade enhances welfare? We know trade enhances welfare. So, on what terms and conditions and to what degree, to what extent we will trade, it depends upon the negotiated settlement. We reach an agreement, that is trade negotiation. The most important problem in a trade negotiation is what I said earlier. Countries differ in their objectives. And these objectives are usually clashing or competing. It is not that our Prime Minister can go to any country and sign anything and come back. He is answerable when he comes back. He is answerable to the whole set of, for example, we have FICCI, Federation of Commerce, all industrialists, all organizations, all non-governmental organizations, so many stakeholders, so many people are there. For example, if in the case of cement industry, take a particular industry, say cement industry, there are so many stakeholders for cement industry. So suppose you are entering in an agreement with Japan for buying and sell, for importing cement. You cannot simply do that. The reason is there are so many interests. There is a powerful lobby here, cement lobby, right? There is a powerful pressure group here. There is a powerful government here. It may be questioned in the parliament. The opposition will question. And there are non-governmental organizations. People in the cement industry will lose the job. Suppliers to the cement industry will lose their profit. So it is actually it's a very complex issue. Anyway, let us assume that of course trade negotiations are taking place because countries always decide on advantageous trade. So what are the different types of agreements? You can keep your book open so that you go faster. Okay. Now, what are the different types? It is written taxonomy. Taxonomy is a classification. Taxonomy is a categorization. Regional trade agreements. We know about WTO. WTO is many large number of 164 countries. But in different parts of the world, in different regions, countries will come to agreement. Okay, in these countries, and E will have an agreement with right? So regional trade agreements are grouping of countries. Grouping of countries. It need not necessarily be of the same area. Because we have a union with EU, we have a free trade agreement with the far off countries. So it is not necessary that they all should be living very closely. Geographically, they need not be united. Like European Union is geographically united, but that is not necessary. And what is the objective of regional trade agreement? Reduce the barriers. Reduce the barriers means increase free trade. Okay, enable freer trade. I'm not saying reduce all types of barriers. Enable freer trade between member countries. Please remember, between these member countries, outside, say for example, K is outside another country. No free trade. Only among them. Okay, you have heard about SAARC. We have heard about ASEAN. There are hundreds of such free trade agreements, and these are known as regional trade agreements. And you will be surprised, as of June this year, now we have only data up to June, there are 303 regional trade agreements in force. 303. So you can actually think about the whole network of regional trade agreements. Then members liberalize trade. That is, A will trade with B will trade with A has given concession to B will give concession to A. That is reciprocal and preferential. All these members will get some preferential treatment. What is preferential treatment? When it comes to trade, I will give preference to these alliances. Regional trade agreement can be reciprocal, that is between two people. You give up something, I also give up something, so we come to an agreement. It can be bilateral, it can be customs areas, it can be multi-country. Multi-country has another name. Multiple countries, we call it multilateral, but since WTO is referred to as multilateral, we usually refer multi-country as plurilateral. P-L-U-R-I. Plurilateral, plural, plurilateral. So let's see, let's quickly go through it. First one is unilateral. We have already done it yesterday. It is not a contract. One country decides without any formal agreement that we will give you some preference. Other states. For example, a developed country need not be between developed and developing countries. Not at all. So one country gives unilateral preferences to another country or a group of countries or a set of countries, some type of preference. It can be zero tariff, it can be lower tariff, and tariff reductions are done, but the second country has no obligation. Second country has no obligation to reciprocate because this is unilateral, there is no contract entered. For example, there was a fund earlier for Africa, that is Africa Growth Fund, I think. It is Africa Growth, it is AGOA actually. Africa Growth Fund, yes, Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. So in that, US told sub-Saharan countries, see, we are going to give you preference. You can export your commodities because we want to make good, developed. But one condition, the goods should be from Africa. It should not be transshipped, okay? Some other country ships it to Africa, then goods enter US. That should not happen. Okay? This is the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. Next, lots of examples. Immediately, for 1991, when India opened up, actually it was a unilateral policy. Because in 1991 we are saying we are opening our market. Why? Because it was our need. It was our need to export our goods and import the components. That is example of unilateral. Bilateral, very easy. Bilateral is between two countries, say A and B. That is, for example, China with Chile. Okay, China with Chile, bilateral. Or China with this trading bloc, this trading bloc. Trading bloc is not the spelling BLOC, it is not BLOCK because we follow the American system in writing bloc BLOCK. Okay, trading bloc. It can be between China and this trading bloc. It can be between China and Chile. It can be between China and India. It can be between China and Bangladesh. It can be between China and America, right? Then that is bilateral too. Then regional preferential trade agreement is what I discussed first. That is certain regional preferential trade. That preference will be given to these countries. Please remember, need not be regional, need not belong to the same region. We have the global system of trade preference among developing countries. GSTP, Global System of Trade Preference. It is very difficult to remember because there are so many such preferential trade agreements. Just one example. Then you know about ASEAN. You know that area, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, all those areas. ASEAN is another example. Then can be a trading bloc. A trading bloc is, they join together and give preferential treatment, but when it comes to external tariff, they apply a common external tariff. Applying a common external tariff. Arab League, Arab League, European Free Trade Area. They have, European Free Trade Area has, Free Trade Association. It is actually EFTA, Free Trade Association. They have preferential trade among themselves. But when it comes to external, they charge a common external tariff. When they come to trade with US, they will have another charge. Okay. Then we are going further and further with integration. As we go from unilateral, integration becomes greater and greater. Point after point, the integration becomes greater and greater. Then free trade area. What will be a free trade area? And preferential, so far we have been talking about preferential. What is free trade? For example, there are 5 members, KLMNO, 5 countries. These countries trade each other without any, of course, that is without any tariff. Theoretically, without any tariff. But practically they can decide on lower tariff. Continues to apply different tariff. These people can have a different tariff. For example, M will be trading with J, O will be trading with I, N will be trading with X. Definitely, they are independent. When it is free trade area, they have to trade freely, but that is it. We are part of, India is part of so many free trade areas, but we are charging different tariffs when it comes to different countries. Example that's given in your book for free trade area is NAFTA, NAFTA. Okay, NAFTA is no more. That's what I said. Everything cannot be written in the book because it keeps changing. NAFTA has come to an end on July 1st, 2020. Now it is October, 2 months back. Now it is United States, it is USMCA instead of NAFTA. That is an updated version of the 25-year-old NAFTA. That was Trump's election promise. Okay, NAFTA will be re-examined. This NAFTA is a very huge, trillions of goods and services going between Mexico, Canada and US. Geographically you can see the place. Okay, Mexico, Canada and North America. USMCA is United States, Mexico, Canada agreement. So who are the countries? United States, Mexico and Canada. This is the substitute of or the updation of it is very important you read, please keep writing, that is USMCA. So you have to change that NAFTA to USMCA because NAFTA is no more relevant. You know about Brexit. For this year 2020, 1st February 2020 onwards, Brexit has taken place. And this USMCA, that is this new NAFTA, the substitute of NAFTA or the updated version of NAFTA, if you read quickly, you will understand country of origin. If 75% of components are manufactured in these respective countries, for example, US manufactures a car which will go to Mexico, 75% rules of origin, 75% of this car is American, then Mexico will have to have free trade. Mexico will have to accept it. Same thing for all the three countries. Then there is a very funny provision that is 40 to 45. Okay. That is a substantial percentage of the automobile. It's all automobile trading, mostly automobile. Substantial part of this automobile should be produced by workers, and these workers should get minimum $16 per hour. $16 per hour. There is some interim period, maybe 20, 21, 23 like that. $16. See, condition on labor. What happens then actually? This is a problem for Mexico because Mexican labor don't get that. Mexico will have to change their labor rules. Then what will happen? Mexico's car manufacturing will become, Mexico's manufacturing will become costly. Just for you to understand, there will be some type of agreement and some type of condition, and countries should be capable of understanding how we are going to be affected. I said about India's FTAs, we have more than 13 FTAs, I think, yes, more than 13 FTAs between India and Nepal, then Bay of Bengal initiative is very difficult to remember. And a free trade agreement is actually a treaty. Okay, treaty. For certain number of years, taxes are completely avoided because it is a free trade area. Then comes a little more than that, a customs union. EU is a customs union, a common external tariff, 27 member country, now only 27 member countries having a common external tariff. That is, these 27 countries will have free trade.
But to the external, they will be charging a common external tariff. A little more higher integration is common market. ASEAN is a common market. European Union has progressed to a common market. In a common market, it is not only common tariff. In the common market, all people will be trading at a common tariff. It is not only trading in goods, movement of factors. People can move, right? For example, a person in France can very well work in Germany. People can move, labor can move, resources can move. And all types of financial and other institutional arrangements are, made similar. That is a common market. And going further, more integration from a common market is Economic and Monetary Union, EMU. Economic and Monetary Union sharing a common currency. You know about Euro. Deepest form of integration, that is single European currency, introduced in 1999, because we are lived long enough, probably you were not born at that time. Introduced in 1999, Euro currency, looking a little bit like gold currency, gold coin, isn't it? It started circulating in 2002. So single currency circulates in the entire monetary union. Naturally, there are many conditions, and these EU countries, European Union countries, not everybody, only Eurozone countries, that is only 19 countries out of 27 countries are having this Euro as their currency. And Euro is the second most circulated currency. First should be definitely dollar. And so this Euro is circulating in all these countries. You can travel from one country to another, no restriction, because it's the same currency. Definitely their monetary policy, go back to our previous lessons, their monetary policy, their fiscal policy, their macroeconomic policy, all these have to be synchronized. Otherwise, what will happen? The value of Euro has to be kept constant. If one country is creating problem like what Greece did, it is going to affect the entire monetary union, because all of them are having the same currency. We are going away from our topic, and some countries did not take Euro, but they are of course members, but they are not taken. That takes us, this is a taxonomy. So please remember, because we have done this taxonomy, it does not mean that they are watertight compartments. Because it depends upon what is the type of agreement. Sometimes for a free trade agreement, there will be some other controls, or some other agreements which are not actually free. So even though this taxonomy is given, please don't misunderstand that these are clear-cut, watertight compartments. They are not. There can be overlapping, but generally this is a taxonomy. Okay, that takes us to World War. Quickly we go to World War, and after World War, you remember IMF. You have done this in school or in plus 2. The Bretton Woods twins, we call it IMF and the IBRD, which is known as the World Bank. IMF is the monetary authority. World Bank is the banking, that is reconstruction agency, and lots of negotiations were going on for an ITO, International Trade Organization, but it did not take place. They could not meet a consensus. And so we had instead a general agreement on GATT. From 1948 till 1995, we had this general agreement on trade and tariff. Think of the title. It is a general agreement on two things, on tariff and trade. It is a general agreement on tariff and trade. So we know that it is pertaining to trade, we know that it is pertaining to tariff. Agreement, there are many countries involved, and what will be the purpose of this? GATT. GATT usually asked a question, very easily answered, very direct question. GATT. It will frame rules, okay, but these rules were not some rules for world trade. And that was the only multilateral instrument. What is multilateral? Where many countries were part of this GATT. And now you should not confuse this with the WTO rules. You know, there are some conditions, because WTO we say rules. Some conditions, but one important problem it is not binding. What is the meaning of binding? You know, that is, you have entered into a contract, it is binding on you. Even though this is an agreement, it was not ratified by the parliaments. So if I don't like to obey that, I can of course not obey it. That is why it is not called rules, it is called as code of conduct. Okay, they were not acknowledged by full GATT people because it was very difficult at that point of time to come to an agreement, and some big countries were making problem and full GATT membership. Another possible question is compare and contrast. After this I'll give you a break. Compare GATT and WTO. That's not an adventurous question, but somebody might ask, okay, because that is a direct question, not direct exactly, but that is not a very adventurous question. This was actually, it was a general agreement, it was a provisional agreement actually. You write left and right, left side and right side. It is a provisional agreement, but WTO is a permanent agreement. We know in 1995 we signed the WTO. So for all those years, people moved with GATT, which is only a provisional and not permanent and not a binding agreement. So we call it was an ad hoc. You know, for ad hoc. Ad hoc is temporary for a particular purpose. That's the meaning of ad hoc. Then the members of in WTO, this is permanent. In WTO, we call members, there are 164 members. Here, you know, they are contracting parties only. Okay, they are contracting parties, not contracting at all. Parties who are agreeing, right? But contracting parties, it is called. They were parties to the agreement. Okay, they were parties to the agreement. There was nothing like an organization with a membership. This is only an agreement. But WTO is but an organization. Right? Then, as I said, never ratified. Parliaments never ratified. But WTO rules are fully ratified by Parliament. So, no country can cheat. Ratified by Parliament. Okay. Ratified by Parliament. Meaning to say, whether Congress comes, BJP comes, some other party comes, you know, this is ratified by the Parliament. We cannot change it. I mean, we cannot say that it is not binding. So the parliaments are okay. This is another very important one. This is trade in goods only. Trade in goods, because in 1940s services were less. Services were less. Actually, shipping service will be there. Some type of aircraft services will be there. But banking and all telecommunication, everything in its very rudimentary form. So that is why only goods were included. But you will find here services, then intellectual property right. Probably at that time nobody ever thought about intellectual property.
That is also part of it. We are going to deal with it. There was no dispute settlement. Very important point. There was no dispute settlement mechanism here. No. Whenever the dispute arise, this GATT, because it is not an organization, it had no dispute settlement mechanism. But the WTO has a very efficient dispute settlement mechanism. One is this is not an organization. Okay, this is not an organization, only an agreement. But WTO is a well-defined organization, well-defined structure in which it is functioning. That is the difference between these two. Now, how GATT failed and all, we will come back after 5 minutes, and then we will go slightly faster because we have to finish. So break 5 minutes and please come back. Please come back at, now it is 6 past 7. Please come back at 11. Thank you. And now that you have understood the difference between WTO and GATT, we have not studied WTO. We know that GATT, General Agreement, was only provisional. It did not survive. It was General Agreement on Trade and Tariff. There were many problems. It did not function properly. And it did not really serve the purpose of a global organization. The reason is, first of all, it dealt with only goods. Most important problem. It dealt with only goods. Whereas trade, the number of goods increased, complexity of goods increased, services increased, services trading increased, then also the issue of intellectual property rights. What is an intellectual property right? A knowledge with a commercial value. Knowledge, it can be an innovation, it can be your finding, it can be your own intellectual property, but this is not covered under the, because at that time research and inventions were not that much, even though from Industrial Revolution onwards we had research, etc. But somehow this was not included. And also the institutional structure, how it was arranged, the institutional structure, it was not very powerful. Here the institutional structure is very powerful. It is an organization. It has got its rules. It is binding. Once you have signed, it is. Then this is not a treaty at all. It is only an agreement which was not binding. And for these reasons, the GATT, and also some more reasons, because trade in goods had increased, trade in services had increased. It is given in your book. It's very simple. That is, world merchandise trade increased. Then the ambiguities of the multilateral system, that is one word that's given in your book. There was so many confusion, and people could interpret it in their favor and do whatever they could do. And then textile trading, agricultural trading, all these did not progress. So developing countries did not get any benefit out of it. That is why discussions kept on. We felt the need for an international organization to regulate and regularize trade between and among countries. And that is how slowly discussions started, and the final, we call it a round. Why is it called a round of discussion? It only means rounds of discussion in which representatives of various countries participate. They sit together and negotiate and talk, and each representative want to protect their interest. So like that, the 8th round, so many rounds were conducted, and the 8th round of discussion, and that is the last round, it's called Uruguay round, lasting for 8 years. Not that they were sitting all the 8 years like together and discussing. On and off discussions were going on, and they could not meet, they could not come to consensus. The Doha round that is going on now in WTO. So each time maybe it is little better, and the negotiating person also has to, the country that is negotiating also has to study the implications of the suggestions. So it took 8 years, and finally it was the birth of WTO. Because of these negotiations, what I am willing to give up, what you are willing to give up. So finally an organization came into effect. How did this organization? Trade is fair as possible and as open as practical, as
fair as possible, because we have done last unit, you will easily understand this. What is fair trade? Where no unfair practices were there. I mean, no competition restricting practices are there. That is a fair trade. And how much can you open your economy? Is it practical to open the entire economy? I mean, is it practical to give access to all commodities from all countries? These were the questions. And negotiations took place, and finally WTO, its rules. As I said earlier, don't misunderstand this code for the rule. The WTO's rules, it is rules based, we say. WTO's rules are the agreements. WTO's rules are actually the agreements entered into by the members. Agreements. So we have signed it. So Uruguay round created new rules, and this rule included trade in goods, trade in services, intellectual property. These two are not covered in GATT. Trade in goods, trade in services, intellectual property, and the most important disadvantage of GATT solved by a unique system of dispute settlement. In trade, there will be always disputes because countries want to protect their self-interest. This is hardcore business. There is nothing like altruism. Altruism is let everybody benefit. No, nothing like that. I want to benefit. So definitely disputes will be there. Now that you know China has imposed so much of, in retaliation to the US, China has imposed so much of tariffs, and US has done so much of tariff. And poor India, don't think that India is innocent. We have banned so many goods from other countries. We have banned so many Chinese goods. Is it okay for India to do that? No, because we have the WTO commitment. We cannot do that. Technically, we cannot do that. Right? And so, disputes are always there. And how to settle these disputes? There is a dispute settlement mechanism. Later, I will come to the dispute settlement mechanism. How it is improperly, stalled or controlled by the US, and actually the dispute settlement mechanism is absent now. Members are not there. So that is a different story. We'll come to that. Like what I said yesterday, some people are more powerful than others. Some animals are more powerful than others. So let's go back to WTO. The biggest reform, WTO. Biggest reform. So what is it, WTO? It is actually an institutional framework. A single institutional framework. Right? Single institutional framework. It is an institution, not an agreement. That is the difference. And please remember, did GATT, we always think that GATT disappeared altogether. It is not correct. Actually, WTO encompasses the GATT. It is actually a modification of the GATT. In which area? Only in goods trade. So, this GATT goods trade is embedded in WTO. It is there. It is in its modified form. All trade in goods is actually the framed based on the GATT. Of course, lots of modifications. So, GATT did not disappear. GATT is embedded in WTO. And what is the motto? Open trade. Open trade for the benefit of all. Nice catchword, isn't it? Open trade for the benefit of all. And what is the principal objective of WTO? This is from the WTO website. Mostly we have taken the right information from the WTO websites and also very reliable OECD websites. Okay, very IMF websites, very reliable websites. What is the principle? What is the purpose? What is the mission? What is the vision? All those things. And what is the principal objective? It's given in your book. Facilitate the flow of trade. There are so many countries, 164 countries. 95 to 98% of the entire world trade is covered. And to facilitate the free flow of trade. What is free flow of trade? Unhindered flow of trade. Smooth flow of trade. Free flow of trade. Fairly. What is fairly? Smoothly, freely, fairly. What is fair? Fair trade is trading parties do not involve in any unfair practices. And the last one is smoothly, freely, fairly, and predictably. What is the predictability of the fair trade? Predictability of trade. I think we discussed it yesterday. A is producing, thinking that I can sell to B and C and D and all the other countries. Suppose A thinks and produces, and suppose B won't buy it, then there is uncertainty. But under WTO commitment, B is supposed to buy goods from all members. For example, electronic goods. I'm only telling you one example, it's not correct because there are hundreds of tariffs. Electronic goods at 10%. So A now knows if it produces electronic goods, it will be able to sell to WTO members at a 10% tariff. That is the meaning of predictability. I can predict because this is the tariff. Nobody can artificially inflate or change the tariff, increase the tariff. It is predictable. So I can arrange the resources. I can arrange my production facilities. I can arrange my production because I know I can sell at a 10% tariff to other countries. And this is only one global organization, as I said, nearly 95 to 98% of world, or the whole entire world trade. As I said, global rules, assurance, stability. Producers know, that is, country A knows that the other markets will be open for me. All the WTO members will keep the markets open for me. I can access or enter other markets and sell my electronic goods, sell my wheat, sell my agricultural products, sell my telecommunication services. The reason is, it is not only goods, services, as well as intellectual property. We'll come to it later. Then there is stability. What is the meaning of stability? Not fluctuation. Because there is always a ceiling. Just to note it down, these are not given in your book. There is always a ceiling on tariffs. The maximum tariff. You remember, most favored nation treatment yesterday's. Ceiling on customs tariff. So there is stability. Tariffs won't keep fluctuating. The policy environment is predictable. That is predictability. For example, what is the policy India is going to make? That is, what is our trade policy? It is not a secret. It is a public document. It is public. Transparency in trade rules. I have to notify. If I pass a trade rule, I have to notify to WTO, this is the trade rule that I have passed. See how stringent, how integrated, and that gives predictability. So if I pass a rule which is not WTO compliant,
that will be deleted. You cannot pass a rule which is not WTO compliant. It is like ultra vires, the constitution probably you have studied. States cannot pass rules which are against the provisions of the Constitution of India. It is like that. Okay. Then equal treatment. Equal treatment. You remember yesterday we have studied that. Equal treatment. What is equal treatment? When a good enters your domestic area, that good should be treated equally with the domestic good. Equal treatment for imported goods and for domestically produced goods. Then we know that markets will be open. I'll get access to markets. And please remember, all commitments under WTO are binding commitments. Binding. I am not supposed to move away from these commitments, and it is binding only because our country has signed it. It is binding for US because it has signed. It is binding for China because it has signed. It is binding for Afghanistan because it has signed. But if it is not binding, all that is a different play of powers that is beyond the scope of our study. That I think the political economy people will study that. But WTO always keeps an eye on the members' activities with respect to trade, on the members' policies with respect to trade. And if you are making a treaty or a plan or something which is not WTO compliant, you really pay the price. In the sense, it is not permissible. Then, how do you take decisions? Decisions are taken by consensus. Consensus. All members agreeing on something. But this is the most important defect of WTO also. It is very difficult for 164 members to come to consensus or agreement on something. And once you come to consensus, that is why different rounds of discussion. That is why Doha round is not culminating. That is why Doha round is not over. Because each time, developing countries will bring in some agenda, more and more agenda. I'm not complaining. I'm not saying it is not good. But consensus is something that is very difficult. And once they reach a consensus, then this will have to be ratified by the respective parliament. That is why ratified, the term ratified, that is okay, saying okay, we agree. That's why I said the ministry changes, the party changes, we cannot do anything because it is ratified. And again, WTO says WTO is one step ahead or a total step ahead for non-discriminatory trading system. What is the meaning of discrimination? Non-discriminatory countries cannot discriminate. That is, rights and obligations of all members. 164 countries are to be treated equally. These 164 members have rights and at the same time obligations also. And governments keep their trade policies transparent and it benefits everybody. And this is all about WTO, how it goes. Then the next portion in your book is, the structure of WTO in page 4.55. I think that's very simple. Ministerial conference. Once a question was asked, council about the councils, 2 marks question. TRIPS council, 1 paragraph. But an additional information not given in the book. How do you join WTO? You just cannot run and sit on a chair and join WTO. There are many conditions. That is, That is, you have to bring your economic policies and trade policies in line with the WTO rules. That is, you cannot be deviating from WTO rules. Your economic policies and your trade policies should be in line with the WTO. Bring it first. That means a lot of structural change in your economy. India had opened up in 1991. We had made so many structures. Not only you make your home okay, home country rules and okay, then you have to negotiate. Be party to the negotiating. That is why after 2000, no single member is actually joined. Afghanistan joined the last, because these negotiations are long processes and it is time-consuming processes, right? That takes us. That is the only additional information. 164 members and all. Now we go to the guiding principles. Very important. Each principle is a question. Each principle, guiding principle, is either one or two questions. One application question and probably one direct question. And there are so many agreements that is given as an annexure in your textbook. There are so many agreements, 19 agreements. Agreements supplement annex. WTO website, you can read the entire. It will take 2 years because it runs to nearly 40,000 pages. And that is what we are studying in one unit. Okay, but we are just trying to understand what a general principle, overall idea about what WTO is. That's all what we are trying to procure. So every agreement has an annex. And in this annex, you will find the detailed provisions. And what are the items included? What are the items excluded? For example, what are the items India has agreed to open up? What are the items that India will not agree? For example, for atomic power, India will say, we will never open up. Okay. Because atomic power is strategic for us. We will not open like this. All items included in the agreement is given there. There is only one agreement which has no annex, and that is trade-related intellectual property rights. When it comes to that, I will tell you. But let's go to the first, second, third, fourth. I'll go in the very same manner in which it is given in the textbook. First is MFN. We have already done that yesterday. Most favored nation. All these 164 countries are most favored. The same things can be used here. Okay, if 6 countries or 8 countries plan together and join, they are preferred each other. Okay, preferred parties, preferred members. Like that, all the 164 nations are most favored nations or MFN. Question: what is MFN criterion? MFN principle. You cannot change it because what is given in the textbook is, and just like law, that is law, you cannot change a bare act like that. Any advantage, favor, privilege, immunity. 4 things. Look in your book. Any advantage, favor, privilege or immunity. Immunity is different from all these privilege, favor and all. Granted, for example, A gives an advantage or a privilege to A. Then A has to give the same advantage, privilege to all the other 103 members. Granted by anyone to any product, any product or service. It is if it is A has given for K, in the case of say saffron or piano, right? So anybody who sells piano or saffron or whatever it may be, the same concession should be given. The same facility should be given because it is principle of non-discrimination. Trade without discrimination. If one country gets a privilege in the case of 10 goods, all the other countries should be given. It has to be extended immediately, unconditionally to the like product originating and destined, all those terms you study. So this is trade without discrimination. Okay, trade without discrimination. But there are some exceptions. That is the second question that can be asked from this paragraph. Exceptions, very briefly written, otherwise it will run to so many pages. If you want to get an exception, you can form free trade. A, B, K, P and Q countries together form a free trade agreement. And these people give 2% tariff each other, okay? 2%. But WTO tariff is 10%. But these people give 2% and they don't give it to other WTO members. Perfectly alright. Because trading within the group can take place at 2%, but trading outside, you need not give this 2% because this is a preferential treatment, a free trade treatment, or a free trade agreement. Or you can even trade among the members at free trade, 0% duty. No problem. That doesn't mean that you have to give 0% to all the WTO members. That is the foremost disadvantage of WTO. Right? That is why so many regional treaties are coming. Why so many regional treaties? Because this is the easiest way to flout this trade without a discrimination. Countries can enter. That is the first exception. The second exception is, you remember yesterday, tariff responses to unfair trading, like anti-dumping duty, trigger price mechanisms, anti-dumping duty and countervailing duties. That is permitted. Because if you feel that a particular party is dumping your goods, if China is dumping its chemicals, yes, India has the remedy. But we have to go through proper procedures. India has the remedy of charging anti-dumping duties. And if somebody is giving a subsidy, a country is giving a subsidy and bringing their goods at a very low price to India, we can find it out. We can initiate an investigation, put a complaint in the dispute settlement body. Right. Then the third one is special market access to developing countries. That also we have studied yesterday. That is, you can give special market access like generalized system of preferences. Yes, these are the three exceptions. So, second question from that paragraph. So, like that you have to study. You study an item, what are the possible, break it into different, okay? Look at the thing altogether, then break it into different. This can be a question, this can be a question, this can be twisted like this. Next one is national treatment principle. That also we have studied yesterday. National treatment principle is NTP, National Treatment Principle. There are two countries, let's change the name, P and Q. Okay. Q sends apples, okay, apples to P. Q sends apples to P. And when it reaches country P, in respect of taxes, or in respect of all internal laws with respect to apple or food trade, everything should be treated just like peas apples. Okay, how will pea sell apples in peas market? That is domestic apples. So imported apples from Q should be treated at par with domestic, not less favorable. Not less favorable means equally favored. If at par, okay, if two nationalities are there and working in a third country, you can say they should be treated at par, isn't it? So domestic products, imported products should be treated at par. We can't say that imported products should be, kept in a separate supermarket and sold. No. Imported goods have to be transported separate. Imported goods have to be transported only in such and such transportation. But domestic goods can be transported as you like now. In everything, that is national trade. That is, once the good enters our area, it is just like our national good. Right? Then, freer trade. Okay, freer trade. Yes, that is the next point. Freer trade. That is also clear. You remember yesterday we have done that. Yesterday we have done a complex lesson, and so today's lessons are easy. They are very much related. How do you make trade free? By lowering the barriers. What are the barriers? Barriers are tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers. So if K and M wants to trade, there are barriers. And so remove these barriers and make the trade free by progressive liberalization. Allow goods and services to easily enter. That is freer trade. But there are some provisions for developing countries. Developing countries and least developed countries, about 47 of them, were given time to phase out. Phase out means, you are poor, so you can't immediately comply. Okay? When computerization comes, you can't treat the computer personnel and the illiterate people alike. You have to give some time for the people to accommodate with these policies. So freer trade was given some, that is part of negotiation. Then predictability, that also we have already discussed. Predictability. The tariffs are predictable. Why predictable? Because once you agree 3% on tomato, okay, I'm simply telling you some easy example. 3% on tomato, that is binding. Bound to tariff, binding. I know that the tomato I produce can be sold in your domestic territory for 3%. And tarification, even though tarification, that's a term comes from tarification is precisely for agriculture, that is the term used. But still, this is a criterion. That is, remove all different types of barriers. There are tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers, all that we have studied. What we should do is finally put all barriers in terms of tariffs. Okay, that is clear and transparent and sure and everything. Okay, it is only tariffs that we have to pay. There is no non-tariff measure. Discourage the use of quotas. We have studied yesterday. Quotas are very bad. Why are quotas very bad? I hope the explanation is binding tariff rates. Quotas are very bad. You know why? Actually, suppose somebody puts a quota, as I said yesterday, 3,000 cars. car is easy. Or 3,000 bikes. Let's make it bikes today. 3,000 bikes can be imported. Only 3,000 bikes can be imported. I am a bike producer. My country is a bike producer. I can produce it at very low cost because technologically I'm so advanced. I can produce it at very low cost, but including the tariff of 25%, I can sell that to country B. I am country A. I am very cost effective. I can sell a bike to B even if B has a tariff of 30%. Because my cost is so high, plus 30% on the bike will still be cheap in country B because I am so efficient. My production technique is so efficient. So even if 30% tariff is there, yes, I can enter because I am so efficient. But country B keeps a condition, a quota of 3,000 bikes. There is no way I can enter even if I am efficient. Even if I am more efficient, there is no way I can sell my bikes in A's bike in B. So quotas are very restrictive. Tariff walls can be broken by people. You can actually enter breaking the tariff wall if you are productively efficient. Because your cost of production, yes. Your cost of production plus 30% tariff will still be cheap in country B. You stand to gain because you are efficient. But even if you are efficient, if country B is putting a quota or a quantitative restriction, you cannot enter. And that is why quotas are discouraged. Market opening commitments are there. That is, you open your market, everybody open your market and ensure transparency, right? Predictability. Then the principle of general prohibition of quantitative, the same point I said. Greater protective effect than tariff, the same point. For example, if I put a quota, I am trying to protect my bike industry. Really trying to protect my bike industry. I am not opening the market for a efficient production rest of the world. Not only A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, G cannot enter. And so it is highly restrictive and highly protective of domestic industry to have a quantitative restriction. Next point is bringing greater competitiveness. Yeah, when it comes to competitiveness, how do you ensure greater competitiveness? How do you make it? What is the meaning of competitiveness? Competitiveness is your ability to sell, of course, given a good quality products at low prices. Competitive prices. It is not low prices, at competitive prices. That is, competitive is definitely lower than what others can sell. And that is your competitiveness, isn't it? That is, you can sell good quality products, but at the same time, price is very reasonable and competitive. There are two ways in which you can sell competitively. You remember yesterday dumping. You remember yesterday we are talking about export subsidies, export incentives, concessions, all types of facilities given to exporters so that artificially, I can give yesterday's example, 40 rupees is the cost of production, 10 rupee I give you subsidy. I can sell at 30 rupees in the international market and make my products competitive, but that is not real competitiveness. That is artificially, unfair practice. Dumping, giving of export subsidies, etc. And the WTO rule is there. I told you about an annexure. Okay. There it is clearly written what is fair, what is unfair. Subsidies. How much of subsidy is fair? How much of subsidy is unfair? If you read through, there are three types of subsidies. Red subsidies, amber subsidies, green subsidies in agriculture. So what type of subsidies is permitted? All these, if you go, it is actually one full paper that some universities prescribe for the post-graduation in trade. Okay, so that is, rules are established. What is unfair? What is fair? So if at all there is a dispute, okay, take the rules. Does it comply with the rule? Then if it does not comply, it is unfair. The tariffs are the legitimate measure I have already discussed. No tariff measure. Everything should be tariff so that it is transparent, clear, and transparency in decision making. Yes, next one is transparency in decision making. What is transparency? India passes a rule. It should be transparent. It is a change in trade. Say for example, we are not going to import goods from China. Make it transparent. Tell it to the WTO people. Invariably, you have to notify WTO about the changes that you have made in your trade policy, in your export policy, in your import policy, in your domestic policies with respect to subsidies, in your domestic policies with respect to concessions given, market access. Give market access, it's a repetition. Special privileges are given to less developed countries or developing countries. Lots of special privileges are given. But that does not fall within the scope of it because we are not studying growth economics. If you are studying growth economics, then we need to know what are the concessions. But please understand for the time being that there are lots of concessions given to less developed countries. And these concessions are, some concessions are for 5 years, some concessions are for 15 years, some concessions are for non-compliance. Okay, you don't have to comply this because you are a poor country. And for your protection of your health and environment, you remember SPS, sanitary and phytosanitary measures are allowed. Then these agreements are, that is all these agreements which progressive liberalization, market access, okay, protection, transparent, yes. 13th point is most important. A dispute settlement mechanism. If you are negotiating and you do something against me, for example, country X is doing something against what country Y does not like what we have done towards China, or what China has done to us. They were dumping, isn't it? They were dumping chemicals, dumping lots of goods. What happened to the toy industry in India? What happened to the decorative industry in India? All those things cheaply come to dumped into India and we just could not survive. Many of our industries could not survive. They exported dangerous goods to our country. Milk powder contaminated with melamine. I hope you have read through all these stories. You have a dispute, you can take it to WTO. There is a dispute settlement mechanism that is given in the structure. That is, if you are not happy with the dispute, just like our civil court, you can go to the higher authorities and then you can have discussion. Finally, whatever is the decision given, you have to finally accept. Right? That is why agreements are just legal foundations. Legal foundations. And these are legal foundations of world trade. They are just like contracts because you are studying theory of contracts. They are just like contract. It is binding. It gives us some important trade rights. As I said, about 30,000 pages. Each member gets a guarantee. And each mutual, it is mutual. I get a guarantee that this will be the behavior in the international trade. At the same time, I also oblige. I also promise Somebody else promises market access. I promise 3% market access to vegetables. India has a lot of vegetables, but still 3% market access to agricultural goods we have to give according to WTO commitment. Right? So WTO agreements cover, let me repeat, goods, services, intellectual property, and the fourth one is permitted exceptions. What are the permitted exceptions? Okay. Then rules based, let me repeat, it is a system based on rules, and these rules are agreements. Agreements. How many agreements are there? You can open your book if you want. There are overview of WTO agreements. These agreements are 30,000 pages divided by 19 agreements. So each agreement is on an average how many pages you can calculate. But that is put in 2 sentences. That means it only tells you what this agreement is about. Just to get an overall idea. Okay, you are interested, you can read maybe after examination. Agreement on Agriculture 1995, year 1995, original agreement. Agreement on Agriculture, as the very name suggests, it is an agreement on agricultural goods. GATT was not at all successful in dealing with agricultural goods. It was mostly trading industry. Who is producing agricultural goods normally? Go to our trade theories. Those goods which are capital intensive will be produced by a capital abundant country, and those goods which are labor intensive will be produced by a country which has abundant supply of human beings or labor. So which country? Developing countries. Developing countries. So we should be given, not only developing countries, in US, agriculture, of course, less than 3% of the people are doing agriculture. But their output is massive. You would have seen in the internet, how cultivation takes place, how mechanized it, how large a farm, the ranchers, that is, animal breeding people, thousands and thousands of cows in one farm, and how large scale production, cost of production naturally comes down. So where will they sell it? American people cannot eat all the meat that is produced. They cannot eat all the butter that is produced. They have to find market. That is why in this that is United Nations New Treaty, UNSCA, what happens is, there is dairy products have direct access to Mexico and Canada. That is the agreement that is made, because there is a lot of in the US. So what are the 3 things that agreement in agriculture? Market access. Open the market for agricultural goods. Second one is domestic support. What support? Domestic support is about price support, income support, minimum support prices, subsidies. You understand? Domestic support. How much of domestic support is permitted? That is a highly disputed area. Because we always say that in the US, indirectly, they have methods by which, huge amount of money goes into agriculture as subsidy. Because they want to promote their agriculture. Even if industrial countries also want to promote their agriculture. And they have low-cost products which they want to push to the entire world. And they say that, our poor farmers should not be given 10% subsidy. There is a difference. The way we do agriculture, because that is our livelihood. We have marginal farming, small scale farming, livelihood farming, right? That is very, very subsistence farming. It's not huge farms like in other countries. So, domestic support, how much of subsidies is allowed? Next is export subsidy. How much of export subsidy is permitted? And hundreds of other things. These are the three areas. Then, agreement on the application of, it is an agreement on the application of SPS. For example, I can now say that I don't want Denmark. I don't want cookies from Denmark, biscuits from Denmark, or butter from Denmark, or butter from Netherlands. I don't want, or flowers from Netherlands. Whatever it is. Reason I will say is sanitary and phytosanitary measure. Oh, that is not good for the health of my people. That will harm my environment. That is not good for my plant. That is not good for my climate. There will be climatic changes because that type of trees, if you bring here, it absorb more water and we have water shortage. All those things we will say, right? But for example, we had a problem with the US. We failed in that in the dispute settlement thing. We failed in the case of American chicken legs, chicken that will be exported to India. We said there is antibiotic more content more than what is permissible in India. America went to the dispute settlement. We failed. It is still. That is why we have to, that voluntary export restraint, I said. We are afraid if America is pressing for that. I have heard rumors, I do not know. 1 kilogram of chicken may be available for 45 rupees. What will happen to our... Isn't it? So, this sanitary and phytosanitary we can say. We failed saying that American chicken legs are not compatible with our standards, okay? And so, arbitrary. These things should not be arbitrary. These sanitary and phytosanitary measures should not be used arbitrarily. Rather, it has to be very scientific. Because there are scientific measurements are there. Particles per million. What is the permissible? Is it 1% pesticide, permissible pesticide? 1%, 2%, 3%? If it is coming within that, there are international standards which we are supposed to obey. Like last year, like very recently, European Union, I think I said, European Union is saying each consignment of our shrimp has to be tested. If it is to be tested, this is application of a restrictive practice on the ground of sanitary unjustifiable. It is unjustifiable discrimination. So, it should be based on standards which are scientifically established. For food, there is called as alimentarius. That is just like your generally accepted accounting practices. Now it is something else. Earlier it was GAP, isn't it? So, like that, generally accepted standards are there. Next one is agreements in textiles and clothing. We are very important clothing manufacturers. So we are given from 1995 to 2005. We did not have to comply with it. And now we have an agreement on textiles and clothing. That is how textiles will be exported. Next agreement is on technical barriers to trade. You remember we have done this yesterday. Technical barrier. That is product specific. Prescribing excessive standards. Misuse of standards. Okay. You prescribe standards which are just simply not attainable. But there are prescribed international standards or harmonized standards. And what is a standard? What is above a standard? What is below a standard? Technical barriers to trade.
so that standards will not be used unnecessarily as a barrier to trade. Then comes, everything is related to yesterday's, that is, then comes agreement on trade-related investment measure. Agreement on trade-related investment measure. TRIMS. Trade-related investment measure. Of course, whenever trade takes place, investment will also come. Volkswagen, the German car company, would definitely find it easier to break through the veil of tariff. Why manufacture in Germany, attract a very high tariff and bring and sell in India? Instead of that, why not establish a production unit here? That is it. Trade will definitely bring investment. If trade is allowed, naturally investments will also come. Then, how can you treat your trade? How should you treat the investment? Just like the apples, example we said, okay? A is buying apples from B, like that. B is bringing investment. Investment is the last unit that we are going to study. B brings investments to A. And then the principle of national treatment. In country A, a person K or an organization O, these people are having investments in country. When B comes, B's investment should be at par with K and O. In respect of taxes, in respect of procedures, in respect of everything. Okay. B should be treated at par with the domestic investment. Should not be discriminating. Principle of national treatment. You remember the second principle after MFN we studied? Principle of national treatment. It should be adhered to. And no particular restriction should be done on country B. One example you remember, local content requirement. A discrimination in government purchases. A discrimination in supply of raw material. You will not give to B. You will give only to K and O. B will be taxed at 40%, but K and O will be taxed at 20%. Not possible. You are not supposed to discriminate. Next one is anti-dumping agreement. Very, very, very prominent agreement. Anti-dumping agreement. So, what is dumping? When do you call there is dumping? How can you, how should countries prove dumping? So, for that there is a dumping investigation. It takes years. If you go to Ministry of Commerce website, there is a separate section itself for dumping investigations that are going on and what is the current status of dumping investigation. So there are rules. What is dumping? There are specific codes as to what is, when do you call something dumping? Whether a particular act can be dumping, when it is, and we know provisions are there. And also then dumping margins. Even if you prove dumping, so for example, a country has proved after investigation, that is, let's name a country as P and Q. P is dumping sulfuric acid, sulfuric acid, or sulfur, sulfuric, or sulfur, or caustic soda, whatever it is, in Q's territory. For that it is dumping. Then, what is the dumping margin permissible? For that, who is dumping? P is dumping in Q's market. For that, P Q has to find out the normal value of sulfuric acid in piece quality. Of course, you will get technical support. And then decide the dumping margin. You cannot say, okay, 40% dumping margin, not possible. Sulfur prices in peace country, what is it? What is the normal value of sulfur? Normal value has many definitions, okay? And according to the normal value, the dumping margins will be decided. How to conduct dumping investigation? Then some anti-dumping. That is, we will say always, okay, so India, that is China is dumping goods on us. Actually, we will say. And rules and regulations. Then comes customs valuation agreement. What is the title? It is an agreement on customs valuation. Where does customs valuation take place? When goods come to the boundary. And suppose India has a particular valuation system, US has another valuation system, and EU has, all countries have another valuation system. It is not acceptable. We have uniform or harmonized valuation system. Harmonize the customs valuation. What is the procedure followed in universally? We have to do that. Rules and regulations we are. No arbitrary customs valuation. Because, you know, for goods which have ad valorem taxes, I can keep the valuation very high, collect the same percentage permitted by WTO, but I value and keep the value twice. You get more value. So no arbitrary customs valuation. Only permitted, standardized, harmonized customs valuation. Next one is agreement on pre-shipment inspection. Agreement on pre-shipment inspection. What is pre-shipment? Before shipment. India produces goods, cashew nuts. Okay, cashew nuts, and India wants to export to Germany. Germany has to make sure that before pre-shipment, the cashew nuts that we are selling, packed cashew nuts, it conforms to the agreed quality, standard, weight. Then there is an agreement on rules of origin. What is it legally? If it contains the maximum permitted level of parts, maximum permitted level of parts of another country, within that maximum, then you can write made in Germany, made in India. Suppose India is buying 99% of the things and just assembling and 1% value addition and puts made in India, it does not become made in India. So there are very specific rules as to what is the country of origin. Then import licensing, procedures, that's what we did today. Making all the administrative procedures, because in India, ease of doing business is not that good. It's very difficult because the procedures are so complex. Ease of doing, I am supposed to answer your queries. In the first session, I did not get any query. No queries. I'm happy, or I don't know. Is it because you understand, or is it because you don't understand? Anyway, no queries. Please put your queries. By 8:40, I will again look if you want, or you can put it tomorrow. But these are simple things. Once you get that, idea what it is, any question can be answered, because this general principle and any agreement is incompatible with the general principle of non-discrimination. Okay. Now comes import licensing. Agreement
on import licensing. When it comes to import licensing, suppose a country makes it very stringent and strict, a procedure which will last 2 years with lots of administrative red tapeism and so on. Imports will not take place. Market access will suffer. Discrimination will take place. It can be used as a protectionist measure. Difficulty to import is a protectionist measure. But simplify. What are the procedures? Should it be single window? Should it be 2 windows? Very much it is written. All the procedures and rules are simplified, and this is a procedure for import licensing. Then comes the agreement on subsidies and countervailing measures. You know what is a subsidy, you know what is a countervailing measure. All these are very specifically defined. When will something become a subsidy? What is a permissible subsidy? When can you apply countervailing tariffs? Agreement on safeguard, that is the next agreement. I have already discussed that. When is the safeguard? Suddenly you find that goods are coming to your country from all sides. Okay, so many goods are coming and your internal market is flooded with goods. What good? Electronic goods, or it can be anything, right? Food, it can be anything. Then you find your domestic industry cannot survive. And so, safeguard, you can't simply say that is the rule is our domestic industry should be seriously injured. You have to prove serious injury. Very difficult to prove serious injury. Be able to prove with the data. When can you go in for safeguard? How can you go in for safeguard? What are the circumstances? What should be done? What should not be done? Then trade in services, very clear. What are the services that, how services should be allowed to be treated just like domestic services, telecom, all types of services, financial services, capital market services, accounting services. I hope you know that accounting services are allowed to enter India. Legal services are allowed to enter. When these enter, it is competing with your opportunities. Right? It is competing with your opportunities. That is why economics is taught to you. How it will affect your opportunities. So services trading, everything written clearly. Intellectual property. Intellectual property, most favored national treatment. That is, any intellectual property that comes, this is a very important point. For example, an intellectual property come to your country A. An intellectual property can be a product, a process, okay, a product, a process or anything. And the moment it comes here, A's people are very brilliant. They copy it and they reproduce it. They reproduce it and they make profit. And what happened? These countries which are bringing these products, they are at a disadvantage. Why? It may be a medicine, it may be a product. They have spent 20 years on research and development, spent 50 billion rupees, and without spending anything, A's people are copying it. So there are very stringent rules for very high levels of intellectual patent protection, very high, that we did not have a patent law in India before 2000. Actually, we had only process patents before that. The product patents started only after we had. only after WTO came. So we have to maintain very high levels of intellectual property protection and administer such rights very, very sincerely and honestly. Earlier I said there is no annexure to intellectual property rules. There is only one statement. Every member nation has to make rules and regulations with respect to protection of intellectual property. You will not copy, you will not imitate, you will not steal any intellectual property, and tough punishments for anyone who is breaking this intellectual property rule like patent. That is why there is no annexure. It is such stuff. No exceptions. All the annexures are required, when there are exceptions, when different countries are given different. Why? Because intellectual property is very valuable. People invest money. One medicine, COVID vaccine, will be found with so many people working, so many animals killed. So much of problem. And then I steal, I sleep all this time, I spend my money on liquor, alcohol, or I spend it on travel. And then finally I steal somebody's property. Is criminal, isn't it? We too have many patents, like we have basmati, patent for basmati. And suppose Bangladesh sells our basmati rice as basmati. There was a row over that, you remember? And so we will not be happy. Similarly, there are intellectual properties. That is how copyrights mainly fall into copyrights. Copyrights, copyrights. That's why you cannot reproduce the movies, English movies that are coming here, isn't it? Punishable. Patents, trademarks, copyrights, then geographical indications, very important. Industrial designs, circuits, something is given in the book. Now, what is this geographical name? Geographical indication is Kashmiri carpets. Somebody living in Africa cannot produce Kashmiri carpet. Kanchipuram saris. Somebody living in Pakistan cannot produce Kanchipuram saris. Geographical indications. We hold lots of geographical indications in India. That is protected. That is intellectual property protected. Suppose it is ours is copied, we will be angry. So any intellectual property is like that. Then settlement of dispute. Very, 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 very specifically in how to settle the dispute. What are the mechanisms? A dispute settlement body is there. If you are not satisfied with the dispute settlement body, you go to an appellate body. Like that. Then last one is trade policy review mechanism. Trade policy review mechanism. As I have already mentioned it, any policy that any country, 164 countries make, it will be reviewed. Is it compatible with the rules? If it compatible with what you have signed? Trade policy. There is a trade policy review mechanism throughout. Trade policy review body is there. A body which reviews the trade policies of India. I don't know what they are doing now. Whether they are reviewing the policies of China, whether they are reviewing the policies of US, all that is different question. But theoretically, there is a trade policy review mechanism. They review the policies, and if it is annual notification requirements are there. For example, all the notifications of all the policies should be notified, not annually, I think periodically notified, and this review body will tell you whether it is okay or not. If it is not okay, you have to change it, because that is understanding. If you make any change in your policy, all 164 people should know what is the policy change, because they need predictability. Then comes some plurilateral trade agreements. You need to write down what is plurilateral, because it's not mentioned in your book. Plurilateral is Plurilateral is that is several countries
have common interest. That is, all 164 countries may not be on certain areas, all 164 countries may not be interested. For example, what African countries and what Asian countries are interested, maybe. So, such issues are actually negotiated on a smaller scale. Or even if it is negotiated at the WTO, you will fail to come to a consensus agreement. So such issues which are not common interest of the entire 164 members, or issues where you fail to reach agreement because some people may not agree, then they don't sign it. Then it does not become multilateral because it's not a WTO agreement. It's an agreement only by few members or maybe large number of members, but by not all members. If it is to become a rule, it should be consensus of all members. So if only some members are signing, several countries are signing, but not all countries, either because some countries are not involved in such issues or because you cannot reach an agreement, then such treaties are plurilateral. If it concerns everybody, you will be given a choice, sign or not sign. If you are not signing, then you are not party to that agreement. You don't have to abide by that agreement. So some people can sign, and such treaties are called as plurilateral trade agreement. Some examples, these are only examples, that is, agreement on trade in civil aircraft, not military aircraft. Civil aircraft is all the passenger and cargo. Okay, that is agreement how trade will take place in the case of civil aircraft. That is Tokyo route. Then agreement on government procurement. Not all, everybody has not agreed. So it is a government procurement. You already know it is a plurilateral treaty. And we come to the next, that is Doha round. Not much is written about Doha round. Doha round is the ongoing discussion. Ongoing discussion. Members meet. Why it is Doha round is called, it was originally, the meeting was in Qatar, Doha, Qatar. That's why it is called Doha round. There are a number of issues that are under discussion, and agreements. Okay, all these agreements are being negotiated. They are not static. That is one condition that is given in here. Very, very large number of issues. I come back to Doha round. Large number of issues are discussed. It is about environment, about agriculture access. Lots of some 13-14 issues are being, but nobody is coming to an agreement. And India is a major country which is standing for the rights of the developing country. Because what we say is, after becoming WTO member, we did not benefit much. Our agricultural goods are not getting access, whereas industrial countries, they sell their goods in our country, but our country is not getting access. So the Doha round discussions are going on. Next round, we do not know when it will come, and developing countries are standing together. So there are many major issues, a few concerns that we can quickly go through so that it finish. We will have a look at it. It's only a few points. First, already we have discussed it here and there. Number one, it is very slow. You can mark. Very slow. All 164 members coming, in the members of a family, 5 people or 4 people cannot reach an agreement easily, isn't it? So that is why 8 years Uruguay round discussion gave birth to WTO. And Doha round started in 2000 and it is still not ending, right? very slow progress. And so, what will people do? Instead of going for all 164, there are more than 130 regional agreement. Regionalism is a good alternative because there is no point in standing in WTO because our issues will not be settled. And so many people there are around 400 plus regional agreements that are being negotiated all over the world. Negotiations are going on. So this regionalism is finally going to fail WTO because this USMCA, that is a regional treaty. Like that, ASEAN is there. SAARC countries are there. So many regions. Then all these complex and these regional agreements are exceptions. So finally, nobody will comply by WTO because everybody is part of a regional agreement. Then next one is liberalizing agriculture. All this has not take place possible. Most developing countries are dissatisfied. Why are we dissatisfied? There is every ground for us to be dissatisfied because we lived longer enough to go through all the discussions as to why WTO. I have even heard saying in discussions that economists discussing that WTO is a conspiracy of rich countries, first world countries to push their excess products to underdeveloped countries. Seeing certain things, we have to believe it also. Of course, within this, it is 25 years now. Within these 25 years, of course, world trade has increased 4 times, of course, trade has increased, but have we benefited? How far have we benefited by opening up? What is the consequence on our industry? Because we have poor bargaining power, then we have lack of infrastructure, lack of human capital, lack of physical capital, then our banking, insurance and other financial institutions are not okay. Our political instabilities are there, and altogether, when you travel, you will find that it will take hundreds of years for us to have the physical infrastructure style that developed countries have. So that physical, human capital and political systems, all these we have weaknesses. And then, how can we be kept at par with the developing countries? There is something we usually call a north-south divide. You see the northern hemisphere of the world, okay, and the southern hemisphere. All people, probably except Australia and Japan countries. Poor countries here, rich countries there. And that is north-south divide. Rich countries dictating terms to poor countries. And we can't put our things, our exports because we face high tariffs. In textiles we have textiles, we face high tariff. We have fish and fish products, we face high tariff. And tariff escalation, what we have learned yesterday, tariff escalation is a big problem. That is, our finished goods will go over there and then they will charge high tariff. Our raw materials, let it go there, they will charge. Apparels, textiles, everywhere we are unhappy. And developing countries are very dissatisfied because real expansion of trade has not happened. I think these points are there. I can even send some extra notes if you are interested, but this number of points is enough. Protectionism is very much there, and last problem is escalated tariff. I already discussed that is tariff rates increasing. Then there is one issue, that is erosion of preferences. That term is given in your book. What is erosion of preferences? Earlier, we were preferred. For example, the tariff difference for developed countries 20%,
for developing countries 10%. So this is definitely a preference, isn't it? For us only 10%. But this 20% declines and comes closer to 14%. But our 10% remains 10%. So erosion, that preference is eroded, that preference is disappearing because we are not, when general tariffs come down, the difference between the current tariff and the exception allowed to us becomes smaller and smaller. And that is a big problem for developing countries. So any tariff reduction is not proportionately available. Right? Then you can read the important agreements listed one by one. It is written. Just go through it. Just as a combined list, you are getting it. All these agreements. Decision achieving greater coherence in global economy. Some are not mentioned by us, except for example the 20th one we have not discussed. So with this, our lessons today is over. I hope you have understood. If you have any doubt, please put it forth tomorrow. And tomorrow we will be going to exchange rate. Exchange rate. Oh, we are going very fast. Exchange rate and its economic effects. Coming to the end of the book. Exchange rate and its economic effects. But it is not very complex. But impact of exchange rate has to be studied very, very carefully because this is the basics of exchange rate calculations which you are going to do in strategic financial management, in all swaps and rates and cross rates and advising people when to trade in currency, all that comes. So fundamentally, these basic lessons will help you a lot when you go for SFM. Just like the cost theories which you study in economics would help you in your cost paper. So this might be of help for you tomorrow. So thank you so much for your patient listening and I hope you have understood and thank you so much and goodbye. Thank you.